Thanks for joining us this morning. We're glad you're here. Let's take a look at what's going on here at Calvary Chapel.
Parents of either high school or college seniors, today is the deadline for submitting your seniors information on our website, calvarycsm.com/graduate. If you'd like us to feature your graduating senior in an upcoming video, make sure you go online today and submit their information. Go to calvarycsm.com/graduate.
Vacation Bible Adventure starts 3 weeks from today. If you haven't already done so, go online to calvarycsm.com and register your kids. We're going to have a great week learning the truth about Jesus, even taking a look at real artifacts that have been discovered by archaeologists that prove what the Bible says is true. Our VBA is absolutely free and a great event to invite your friends to, the people on your kids' team, or maybe your neighbors. It's going to be a great week.
Parents of middle school students, this Friday night from 6 to 9 p.m., we're having an end-of-the-year pool party at the Davies home. We want to celebrate the end of a long, challenging school year with a fun night with food and swimming. Drop off and pick up is here at the church. The cost for this event is only $5, and you can register your child this morning at the information counter.
Over the next 2 Sundays, May 23rd and May 30th, we'll be hosting 2 separate luncheons to provide an opportunity for new families within our church to get to know our pastors and church leaders. The lunch is free. We hope by eating together, we can get to know each other better. Our first lunch next Sunday, May 23rd, is at 1 p.m. It'll be geared toward families with middle school and high school students. Myself, along with Pastor Matt and Pastor Andrew, are looking forward to having the opportunity to get to know you. Space is limited, however, and sign-ups are first come, first served. So if you're interested in attending, sign up at the information counter this morning. Then our second luncheon will be in 2 weeks on Sunday, May 30th. Again, I'll be there along with Pastor James and our Children's Ministry Director, Miss Stacy. This will be primarily for families with children in elementary school and for folks without children. Again, space is limited for these luncheons, so make sure you sign up at the information counter if you're interested. We hope to see you over the next 2 weeks.
Timeout is meeting this Saturday night in the Brook at 7 p.m. If you're a married couple with kids, we invite you to join us for a Bible study and some fellowship with other couples in the same stage of life.
Parents of elementary age students through high school students, our summer retreats are just a few weeks away. For students who have completed 5th grade through the 8th grade, you can join us on this year's middle school retreat, June 7th through the 11th. The cost is $300, which includes 5 days and 4 nights of fun at a Wanata Valley Retreat Center with a Hummer ride, lake activities, Bible studies and worship, and lots of outdoor fun. With worldly influence continually rising in our culture, our theme this year is Choose This Day from Joshua 24:15, where our students will be challenged to stand firm and choose the Lord this day. We encourage you to make this retreat a priority for your middle school student this summer, which is just 3 weeks away.
For any students who have completed 8th grade through 12th grade, our high school retreat is taking place June 16th through the 20th at Whitewater Express in Tennessee. The cost is $280 for 5 days and 4 nights of whitewater rafting, paintball, worship and Bible study, swimming, and more. Our theme this year is Built Up, where we'll learn how to build our foundation on God's Word and make Jesus our chief cornerstone.
Kids Camp is our overnight camp for kids who have completed 1st grade through 5th grade. In fact, kids who have completed 5th grade are invited to both Kids Camp and the middle school retreat. This year's Kids Camp is at Hard Labor Creek State Park in Rutledge, Georgia. Our theme is heaven, the place where we finally get to meet Jesus face to face. What does the Bible say about heaven? How do we get there? How should it affect our lives today? That's what we'll be talking about at Kids Camp, and you can sign your kids up online at calvarycsm.com. We don't want money to be the reason for a child to not be able to attend any of our camps or retreats. So if you have any concerns, come talk to me, Pastor Matt, or Pastor Andrew. The Lord can make a way.
Thanks again for joining us this morning. Let's worship the Lord together.
30 years ago, we were in need of some help. It was the first person we were going to hire on staff here at Calvary Chapel. And one day I saw Pastor James and I said, Pastor James, I said, how would you like to come up and, I didn't say Pastor James, he wasn't pastor at the church. And I'll never forget his reply, doing what? I said, how would you like to come up and be our assistant pastor? He said, let me pray about it. Well, he called me back the next day and he said, I'd love to do that. That's what I feel like God's calling me to do. And so for 30 years now, James has been our assistant pastor. We celebrated his 30th anniversary this past Thursday here at the church. And this morning we've put together a little tribute. You know, that's something that needs to be commemorated and celebrated. You don't see that kind of loyalty and love for a church very often. And so we all appreciate Pastor James this morning. He's running around solving problems at the moment. So this morning when you see him, make sure you tell him how much you appreciate him. But we put together a few and all of he and Donna, a little tribute to Pastor James. And of course, James was our worship leader for many years, and so it kind of closes with him showing off his musical talents and calling us to worship. So why don't we show it? Thanks, Pastor James. And last but not least, we're here in Pastor James's office. That you're probably really good at blowing this shofar. And so, Pastor James, how about blowing the shofar? Call us to worship this morning with the priestly shofar. Here he is. Here's Pastor James. A little bit of Jewish blood in him. Here it is, right here. Author Robert Frost summed up all he had learned of life in the phrase, life goes on. Life has no timeouts, no interruptions, no half times, no intermissions. Life never takes a break to let you catch your breath. Life marches on. And the key to a fulfilling life is to find some meaning along the journey. This was the quest of the ancient Greeks. They scoured life for its overarching purpose. The Greeks noticed that life operated by natural laws. This indicates a kind of logic or an intellectual force behind the order and symmetry that characterizes life. The Greek philosophers coined a term for this ultimate meaning. They called it the logos, or in English, the word. And this was the goal of Greek philosophy, to identify the logos, or the reason behind reality. They examined the visible world for expressions of life's unseen purpose. And yet, despite their great wisdom, the philosophers failed to find the answer. Their search for meaning was a bust, summed up by the man who quoted Robert Frost, but with a twist. Life goes on, I just forgot why. The Apostle John wrote to a Greek audience, and he must have shocked his readers. For in this first chapter, he answers the question that had stumped their famed philosophers for centuries. John had good news. The Word had been heard, the unseen revealed. There is a God, and He has made known His purposes in a word. The Logos, the Greeks searched for, was not a primal force, but a person named Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus is the reason behind reality. He is the Logos behind the cosmos. Jesus Christ is the residence of absolute truth, of undiluted love, of eternal life. Whole life goes on, and it's all about Jesus. Come to Him, and you'll find your life's true purpose. This is the theme of John's Gospel. And he starts with a bang. In the beginning was the Word, or the Logos. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Jesus is the Word, and the Word was God. Here is an emphatic declaration of the deity of Jesus. Just as my words are an expression of my mind and my heart, the Word is the expression of God. Hebrews 1, verses 1 and 2 tell us that in times past God spoke through Hebrew prophets, but in these last days He has spoken to us by His Son. Jesus Christ is God's final word to humanity. You know, the Nike swoosh may be the sporting world's most famous logo. The swoosh is everywhere. Nike pays teams to wear their swoosh. It's nothing but a fat apostrophe. But all over the world, it's instantly recognizable. It stands for what Nike promotes: speed and skill and athleticism and victory. And God also has a logo. His Word became flesh, a baby, a little apostrophe, if you will, was born in Bethlehem. And when you think of God's infinite wisdom and ultimate power and perfect love, you should think of Jesus. For our Lord is God's logo. He's God's swoosh. You see, all of Nike's corporate goals and culture are encapsulated and expressed in that swoosh. Likewise, all of God is packed up and revealed in Jesus Christ. Yet here's a difference in a logo and the Logos. Nike created its swoosh, whereas the Logos of God was before creation. For John says of Jesus in verse 2, He was in the beginning with God. Jesus is the expression or the Logos of God, but He's more, for He's God Himself. You see, the Greek word for God is theos. And John is saying that the Logos and the theos are one and the same. Jesus was pre-existent and uncreated. He was with God before time began. In fact, He was God. The key to life is Jesus. And then verse 3, all things were made through Him. And without Him, nothing was made that was made. In Genesis 1, verse 26, on the sixth day, God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Notice God referred to Himself in creation by the plural pronoun. He said, let us make man. You see, the Bible teaches there is one God, one true God, but that one God eternally exists in three persons: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Christians refer to God's nature by the term Trinity. God is a blend of both unity and diversity. He's one God, but that one God exists in three distinct persons. And the Father was not alone in His creation, for all three members of the Trinity played a role. In the Bible's opening scene, the Spirit of God hovers over the water. Then the Father speaks through the Word of God, Jesus, let there be light. And there was light. As John says, all things were made through Him. And in Him was life. And the life was the light of men. Modern genetics has enabled us to engineer the coding of life. Scientists can manipulate the genes of tomatoes to yield specific flavors. and program flowers to produce different colors. Geneticists tinker with the molecule's DNA, but they can't produce life itself. Life comes from God. John says it originates in Jesus. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. Thus, the key to improving our quality of life isn't found in unlocking our DNA, but in submitting to God and his desire to transform us spiritually. Rather than undo the fall, through Christ we can be redeemed, which is better. Jesus' life is the template or the prototype of what every life was meant to be. His life, John says, was the light of men. You know, the ancient Greeks thought life consisted of 4 elements: light and breath and water and bread. And this is what shapes John's depiction of Jesus throughout his gospel. In chapter 1, Jesus is presented as the light of life. In chapter 3, he's portrayed as the breath of life. In chapter 4, he's the water of life. And in chapter 6, he calls himself the bread of life. Well, John also writes in verse 5, "And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it." Did you hear about the colony of mice that lived deep inside the grand piano? From the beginning, the mice enjoyed the beautiful music that came from that piano. The music lightened up their dark piano world. Common sense told them that such music was no accident, that all mice believed in a great unseen pianist. That is, until one day, an inquisitive mouse crawled into a part of the piano no mouse had ever been before. He reported back that vibrating wires is what made the music. Then another mouse ventured deeper into the guts of the piano and said that the first mouse was wrong. The music was made by felt hammers striking the wires. Well, the mice concluded that their world was mechanical and impersonal. The great unseen pianist must have been a myth, a primitive speculation of what now could be physically explained. And yet, sadly, they only looked inside the piano, not outside, to the great pianist who sat at the keys. And what happened to the mice colony in their piano world has happened to modern man in God's world. We've scratched the surface of knowledge, and we've learned a bit about the mechanics of God's creation. And in our arrogance, we've concluded that the music of life is the result of wires and hammers. All the while, we've ignored the all-knowing and all-talented pianist sitting at the keyboard. Friends, if you've not discovered Jesus, it's because you're only looking inside the piano. You're searching in the dark piano world rather than looking outside of the piano, for there is a light shining into our darkness. And Jesus is that light. And yet John says we've become so used to the darkness that the light now hurts our eyes. And so we've covered our eyes rather than let the light shine in. This is why God sent a helper to open our eyes to the light of God. And we read of him in verse 6. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. Not the author and disciple, the Apostle John, but John the Baptist. We're told this man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but he was sent to bear witness of that light. The moon has no light of its own. It only reflects the light of the sun. Likewise, John was not the light. Like the moon, he simply reflected the light of God's Son. That was the true light which gives light to every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. Here's the greatest tragedy in all of history. The Creator, the light of the world, visited the world that he created, yet the creation failed to recognize him. Verse 11, for he came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Jesus of Nazareth suffered from a tragic case of mistaken identity. He came to his own, John says. He came to the Jews. These were the people who could have recognized him, who should have recognized him. Through their prophecies and pictures, the Hebrews were taught that Messiah, what he would be like. They were given an impression of Messiah. If they'd been looking without prejudice, they would have concluded that this was Jesus. They would have seen God's nature and love and promises in the person of Jesus. But there was evil in their hearts. And rather than receive the truth, it caused them to try and silence it. Verse 12, but as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believed in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. You see, the Jews felt that it was their right to be the children of God. They assumed, what blinded them to Jesus, they assumed that membership in God's family was a matter of pedigree and of privilege and of performance. And this is what they emphasized, all three. They were born of the bloodline of Abraham. They had the pedigree. They behaved according to the law of Moses. And salvation was bestowed on them by priestly pronouncements. But they were completely wrong. For here Jesus says salvation is not granted by pedigree and performance and privilege. Salvation is granted by God and God alone. He sets the terms. He issues the pardons. He redeems spirits. Salvation has never come via blood or birth, or by the strength of human flesh, or by permission of a man or men. In short, by breed or by deed or by decree. That's not how salvation comes to us. God alone hands out salvation. And he's chosen to give it only to those people who trust their lives to his Son. And then verse 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Greek word translated dwelt means to pitch a tent. The impression here is that Jesus was God camping among us. I love the paraphrase. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. God came to the hood. He stepped out of heaven to walk our mean streets. This gives Jesus some street cred. In short, God became a mouse and moved into the piano. And please don't gloss over this miracle that the Word became flesh. The Logos, the source and culmination of life, fashioned a body from human blubber, slid from eternity into time through a woman's birth canal, was wrapped tightly in strips of scrap fabric, then laid in a feed trough. God entered the world through its lowest door. He stooped down to lift us up. God now cries when we cry. He laughs when we laugh. He hurts when we hurt. See, the Greeks figured that the Logos created the universe and then went into hiding. But John says Jesus not only created the universe, he joined it so that he could save it. For verse 14 continues, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. I once had a friend who worked at a nuclear lab. Whenever I saw him, I would jokingly say, man, there's a special glow about you. But you know, that was really true of Jesus. John says, we beheld his glory. Now, I don't think Jesus glowed in the dark. He didn't have some phosphorescent tint about him. But you knew Jesus had been with the Father. He had an authority about him. Jesus was only 30-something years old, but he seemed timeless when you met him. Everything about our Lord smacked of the supernatural. Traces of God were all over his life. And what really set Jesus apart was a blend of grace and truth. There was no harshness in the truth that he spoke. And yet there was no compromise in the grace that he showed. He called out and he forgave sin with an equal boldness. And note what John calls Jesus, the only begotten of the Father. You know, the other Gospels tell us that Jesus was born of a virgin. God was his father, not Joseph. When Jesus was conceived, God's Spirit borrowed Mary's womb. A divine seed nestled in a human cradle. Mary's child was no mere man, but God's offspring. No one else can claim this kind of exclusivity and physical origin. Jesus is the only begotten of God. And then verse 15 shifts back to John the Baptist. John bore witness of Jesus and cried out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me." Now, John the Baptist and Jesus were cousins, remember. John was 6 months Jesus' elder. Yet here John speaks of Jesus' pre-existence. He said, Jesus was before me. For unlike us, Jesus' birth was not his beginning. John knew that Jesus had shared eternity with the Father before coming to earth. And of his fullness we have received, and grace for grace. There's a Dennis the Menace comic strip that I think perfectly defines God's grace. Dennis and his buddy Joy, they're walking home from the Wilson's house. Their hands are full of cookies. Their faces are covered with crumbs and chocolate smudges and these great big smiles. Joey asks, "I wonder what we did to deserve this." Dennis, normally a menace, a young man certainly in need of God's grace, he answers Joy. He says, "Look, Joy, Mrs. Wilson gives us cookies, not because we're nice, but because she's nice." And this is grace. It's unprompted love. It originates in God, not us. It's never earned. It's never purchased. Grace is love that's on the house. And Jesus is full of grace. His love is grace for grace, we're told. Jesus is not only full of grace toward us, he fills us with grace toward others. Grace is love for us, and it's also power to love others as we've been loved. For verse 17 tells us, "For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ." Through the law, Moses revealed God's rules, God's righteousness. But through Jesus, God revealed the truth of his intentions and heart toward us and the reality of his amazing grace. You know, Moses said, "Don't cross that line," while Jesus says, "I'll bear the cross for you." Moses said, "You better not." Jesus says, "Trust me and I'll make you better." Moses said, "You don't deserve God's blessing," whereas Jesus serves up blessings that no one deserves. If you want justice, see Moses. But if you need mercy and grace like me, you need to call on Jesus. Grace came through Jesus. Think of it this way. Moses wrote traffic tickets, but Jesus teaches us to drive safely. How about that? And here's the challenge for a church. Do we issue citations? Or do we encourage folks to get in the car and teach them to drive? That's what we should be doing. Christians are agents of God's grace, yet too many churches act like disciples of Moses. The law gets preached every Sunday, do this and do that. Too many churches are judgmental and legalistic. At Calvary Chapel, we want to be a grace place. The law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Whose disciples are we? And then verse 18, "No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him." Now, Exodus 33 tells the story of how Moses saw God's backside. Not his face, but his back. Apparently, under the law, this was as close to God as anyone got. But now the Son has declared God, John says. The Greek term translated declared is exegesis, which means to explain or to unfold. You know, a good Bible study is sometimes called an exegesis of the text. Well, Jesus is the exegesis of God. Watch Jesus. Listen to Jesus, and you get a sermon about God. His whole life was a divine revelation. He is the Word made flesh. And then verse 19 again shifts back to John the Baptist. Jesus is advanced man. John paved the way for Jesus with a message of repentance. We're told, now this is the testimony of John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, who are you? Now, John the Baptist lived an austere life. You remember he came out of the wilderness munching on locusts and wild honey. He lacked the refinement of the Jerusalem priesthood. And yet people from all over Israel were flocking to listen to John. John told the people to repent of their sin. And then he dunked them in the river. It was a symbol of God's cleansing. Jerusalem's religious hierarchy saw John as a threat to their influence. And so they sent a posse of priests to interrogate him and to question him. They say, who are you? Verse 20. Well, he confessed and did not deny, but confessed, I am not the Christ. Christ is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Messiah or anointed one. He wasn't the Messiah. And they asked him, what then? Are you Elijah? He said, I am not. Are you the prophet? And he answered, no. Now, according to the last chapter of the Old Testament, Elijah is to return before the coming of the Messiah. And I believe this will happen. Revelation 11 mentions two witnesses appearing on earth prior to Jesus' second coming. It's my opinion that one of them will be Elijah. These priests knew Malachi's prophecy, and they asked John if he was Elijah. John had said elsewhere that he had come in the spirit and power of Elijah. But here he makes it clear, no, I am not Elijah. The priests also asked him, are you the prophet? This was a reference to Deuteronomy 18, verse 15. For Moses had predicted that God would raise up a prophet like him, the fulfillment of which, again, was the Messiah, not John. John was not the Christ. He was not Elijah. He was not the prophet. So they continued their interrogation. Then they said to him, who are you? That we may give an answer to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? John said, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said. And here John quotes Isaiah 40, verse 3. For Isaiah mentioned an unnamed prophet, a voice crying in the wilderness. In essence, John is saying, I'm that voice. I'm not the Messiah. I'm not the guy. I'm just the cry. What was vital about John was his message, not the messenger. In the first century, it was common for visiting dignitaries to send out an advance team. They would travel the route the king would pass. Dangerous bends in the road were straightened out. Potholes were all repaired. Their job was to make sure the coast was clear for the king's arrival. And this was John's job. It was to make straight the way of Messiah who would come after him. John's ministry was to point folks to Jesus. Author Pam Petler, he has a chapter in her book, The Joy of Stress. The chapter's entitled, They're Getting Ahead of You. She tells the story of a graduate student at the University of California in Berkeley. This was an intense, highly competitive young man with great ambitions. And yet one day, in the library, this fellow went berserk. The police had to come and arrest him. He was shouting at the other students, stop, stop, you're getting ahead of me. He just went out of his mind. But let me ask you, how do you respond when you realize that other people are getting ahead of you? You know, it's been said, just when you start winning the rat race, you meet faster rats. In fact, while you're here this morning at church, there's a salesman out there planning his day tomorrow, hoping to get the jump on you. There's a musician practicing to take your place. There's a ball player training to take your position. All of them hoping to better you in some way. How do you respond? John the Baptist ran his race faithfully and left it up to God where he would finish. Are we trying to be somebody, even somebody for God? Or are we content to be a nameless voice that points people to Jesus. Not the celebrity, not the guy, but just a cry, a shout out for Jesus. That's what I want to be. And then verse 24. Now those who were sent were from the Pharisees, and they asked him, saying, why then do you baptize if you are not the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet? To baptize required some divine authority. John answered them, saying, I baptize with water, but there stands one among you whom you do not know. It is he who coming after me is preferred before me, whose sandal strap I am not worthy to loose. The coming one, Jesus, has the real authority. For compared to Jesus, John wasn't worthy to untie his master's sandal, the job of the humblest slave. Verse 28, these things were done in Bethabara, beyond the Jordan, where John was baptizing. You know, it's interesting, John was baptizing near the Jordan River, where God had rolled back the water so Joshua and Israel could cross over onto dry land. That crossing and John's baptism were both signals of new beginnings. Well, the next day, John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Now realize, prior to this moment, 1,500 years prior to this moment, the Jewish sacrificial system had produced an ocean of blood. Millions of animals had been sacrificed. And they all had pointed to the one supreme climactic sacrifice, the sacrifice that would end all sacrifices, the cross of Jesus Christ. The Son of God will spill his sinless blood. His sacrifice will do what all the others foreshadowed but fell short of accomplishing. Obtain for us a permanent pardon. And John is clear that Jesus will not only die for Israel's sins, but for the sin of all humanity, for the whole world, for all time. Reminds me of a mother who was reading her daughter the story of Abraham and Isaac. The little girl heard how Abraham had strapped Isaac to the wood, had raised his knife, and then at the last second, God had stopped his hand. He provided a ram for the altar. The mother considered the story a beautiful testimony to God's faithfulness. But the young girl had a different take. She said, I don't like killing animals. You know, when we hear Jesus called the Lamb of God, you know, we can skip over the obvious here. When you offered a sacrifice, do you realize what you did? You took that lamb by the scruff of the neck, you took a butcher knife, and you slit that animal's throat. It convulsed. It squirted blood all over you. It squirmed painfully and then collapsed. It was awful. And you were probably fond of this animal. You had been taking care of this animal. It was to you like killing a pet. See, temple Jews never heard the word sacrifice and then reacted glibly. They knew the cost. And thus, when John points to Jesus and shouts, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, trust me, I'm sure he said it triumphantly, but he also said it with a tear in his eye, for he knew what it would mean for Jesus. John continues speaking of Jesus, verse 30. This is he of whom I said, after me comes a man who is preferred before me, for he was before me. I did not know him, but that he should be revealed to Israel. Therefore I came baptizing with water. Now, I used to think of Jesus and John as teenagers, you know, sitting around the campfire, dreaming of their destiny years beforehand. But I don't think that's how it happened. John says here he was familiar with Jesus. They were cousins, no doubt. But it wasn't until he baptized Jesus and God's Spirit came upon him that John was certain that he was the Messiah. For we're told in verse 32, and John bore witness saying, I saw the Spirit descending from heaven like a dove, and he remained upon him. I did not know him, but he who sent me to baptize with water said to me, upon whom you see the Spirit descending and remaining on him, this is he who baptizes with the Holy Spirit. And I have seen and testified that this is the Son of God. God himself had affirmed Jesus' identity to John. You know, it wasn't the stories he had heard from his mother Elizabeth and her encounters with Mary. It wasn't even discussions with Jesus himself that had persuaded him. No, John saw God's Spirit come upon Jesus at his baptism. He had seen God speak to him directly, and it was God who identified to John that Jesus was the Messiah. And then verse 35 introduces us to Jesus' first two disciples. Again the next day, John stood with two of his disciples, and looking at Jesus as he walked, he said, "Behold the Lamb of God." The two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. These men were originally followers of John before he pointed them to Jesus. Again, John prepared the way, then got out of the way. That's what we need to do. Verse 38, then Jesus turned and seeing them following, said to them, "What do you seek?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which is to say, when translated, "Teacher, where are you staying?" Now these guys were Peter and Andrew. They wanted to learn from Jesus. And so he said to them, "Come and see." They came and saw where he was staying and remained with him that day. Now it was about the 10th hour. The day started at 6 a.m., so this was now 4 in the afternoon. And so they decided to stay with him. Now one of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. 3 times Andrew is mentioned in the New Testament. And each time he is bringing someone to Jesus. You know, we all need to be like Andrew and bring people to Jesus. And guess where we can start? We can start with our own family. That's where Andrew starts. He brings his brother, Simon Peter. Verse 42. Now when Jesus looked at him, he said, "You are Simon, the son of Jonah. You shall be called Cephas," which is translated a stone. Cephas is Aramaic. It's the language spoken on Jerusalem streets during Jesus' day. It was spoken by Jesus 90% of the time. And here Jesus renames Simon Cephas, or stone. Later he'll repeat this name change by giving Simon a Greek name, Petra, or Peter, which means rock. You know, often when a person made a dramatic turnaround in their life, they would be given a new name. Jesus transformed this disciple, Simon, into Peter. He went from shifty to a solid rock. Well, the following day, Jesus wanted to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." And Philip did. Tradition tells us that after Jesus' resurrection, Philip preached the gospel in what is today Turkey. In 54 AD, he was scourged and crucified for Christ. Philip followed Jesus the rest of his life. Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter, apparently their hometown. Bethsaida was a fishing village on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. And Philip's decision set off a chain reaction. Andrew found Peter, Jesus found Philip. Philip now finds his buddy Nathanael, verse 45. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Now Nathanael was justifiably skeptical. This tiny Galilean village of Nazareth, it had a seedy reputation. It was set at the crossroads of several major caravan routes. It was like a South Georgia truck stop. That was kind of the climate there. The kind of place that would produce a son of a gun, not a son of God. And thus he scoffed, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And I love Philip's reply. He said to him, "Come and see." This is how Jesus responded to Andrew and Peter, remember in verse 39. In fact, the phrase "come and see" was used by the rabbis. It meant, let's sit down and let's investigate this matter together. Let's examine this personally. And I hope this is your attitude toward Jesus and toward Christianity. Come and see for yourself. Don't just listen to what other people have said. Investigate this personally. Come and see. Verse 47, Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no deceit." See, Jesus had yet to meet Nathanael, but he had supernatural knowledge of him. Jesus knew he was an open-minded man, that he would assess the facts fairly. And Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" Jesus answered and said to him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." See, now while Nathanael was questioning, what good thing can come out of Nazareth, far away from Nathanael, in Jesus' mind's eye, he had seen the man under a fig tree, enjoying its shade, munching its fruit, talking this over with Philip. Nathanael was impressed that Jesus had seen him at a distance, his prophetic powers. And so he answered and said to him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus had seen across time and space what no man could naturally see. It caused Nathanael to believe in Jesus. And then verse 50, Jesus answered and said to him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." In other words, you ain't seen nothing yet. And he said to him, "Most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." And this is a reference to Genesis chapter 28 in the story of Jacob's ladder. You remember Jacob was on the run from his brother Esau when he saw a vision of a ladder to heaven. It was as if God was dropping down to Jacob a rescue, a rope. God was sending him a rope. Nathanael may have been meditating on Genesis 28 when Philip approached him. Jesus is saying that he is that ladder of which Genesis spoke. He is the way from God to man. Nathanael will know God by following Jesus. And over the next 3 years, Nathanael did see heaven come to earth. He saw the miraculous and the angelic. Think of all that Nathanael would have missed had he not accepted the invitation to come and see. And that's why I want to encourage you this morning. Don't you miss out on what Jesus has for you. Come and see. For in just John's first chapter, we learn that Jesus is the Logos of life. He's the life, He's the light, He's the Lamb, He's the ladder. And He'll be all that to you and more if you trust Him today. That's my hope. I hope that you will. I hope that you'll come to Jesus and follow Him.